Welcome to part 4 of this series. My name is Markus Wesaw, and I will be your facilitator for this presentation entitled, What is OSHA? An Introduction to Health and Safety. If you have any questions regarding this material, feel at liberty to contact me using the information provided on the screen. The number and type of injuries and illnesses within a given workplace is probably one of the most overlooked administrative issues I can think of. Employers who employ more than 10 employees are required by OSHA's record-keeping regulations to maintain OSHA 300 logs for injuries and illnesses. The three OSHA logs are the OSHA 300, the OSHA 300A, and the OSHA 301. The OSHA 300 form is a log of work-related injuries and illnesses that an employer is required to complete when injuries and illnesses occur within a given workplace for a calendar year. The OSHA 300A form is simply a summary of the OSHA 300 log for the same calendar year. For many of you, the phrase OSHA recordable may be familiar to you because the phrase has been perhaps used during your career. But what exactly does an OSHA recordable mean? An OSHA recordable, or perhaps more accurately, is an OSHA recordable injury or illness that is a work-related injury or illness that must be documented on the OSHA 300 log. Moreover, an OSHA recordable injury or illness is categorized as one of the following: a fatality, a days away from work case, a job restriction or job transfer case, or other case. The number of days away, or the number of days spent on job restriction or job transfer, is documented on the OSHA 300 log, and it is important to note that this number is capped at 180 days. The OSHA 301 form is simply an injury and illness incident report document. One of the most common questions that I get regarding the OSHA 301 form is whether or not an equivalent form can be used. The answer is yes, so long as your organization uses an equivalent form that contains at least the same information as the OSHA 301 form. Because of the sensitive nature of the OSHA 301 form, personally identifiable information from the OSHA 301 form is typically not provided for every employee's review. An employee or employee representative may request a copy of the OSHA 301 form for an incident involving that employee only. Employees have a legal right to review the OSHA 300 log for the current year and for the preceding 5 years. Additionally, employees have a legal right to view the OSHA 300A form as well. I want to make a note about the OSHA legal requirement to keep and maintain OSHA 300 logs. From a regulatory standpoint, employers who employ less than 10 employees are not required to keep and maintain OSHA 300 logs. However, in my professional opinion, keeping and maintaining OSHA 300 logs is absolutely essential for every business. In fact, many small businesses with less than 10 employees are often surprised when a general contractor requires a review of 3 to 5 years of OSHA 300 logs as part of the subcontractor selection process. So in other words, small employers with less than 10 employees are often asked to submit the OSHA 300 logs anyway. Let's look at an OSHA 300 log now. On your screen, you will see the OSHA 300 form as an example of how they look when properly completed. We see that all personally identifiable information has been removed, as well as the name and address of the company. This OSHA 300 log covers the year 2012 where we can clearly see 13 different injuries. The injuries and illnesses are logged by job title, date of the event, location of the event, and by a description of the injury or illness. The employer must then determine how to classify the case. That is, was it a fatality, days away, job transfer or restriction, or other type case? If the case is classified as a days away case or job transfer or restriction case, the number of days must be properly accounted for on the OSHA log, or OSHA 300 log. We could probably spend a great deal of time going over the OSHA 300 logs and how they are used, but in the interest of time, I simply wanted to present to you an overview of what the log is and what it is about. More to the point, every employee should ask to see the OSHA 300 log as well as those available for the preceding years. Most employees find the information very useful because, as you can see from the example presented on your screen, one can easily determine what job titles have the most injuries and where most injuries occur within the workplace. You can also look at the description of the injury or illness for each event to determine how people are getting hurt in the workplace. This information could be of use to an employee who wants to know how and why employees get hurt in the workplace, in addition to how to prevent injuries or illnesses from occurring to them and others around them. Another example of the OSHA 300 form can be found in handout number 6. So, what do we do with the OSHA 300 log once the year is over? Well, we take the information from the OSHA 300 log and place it on the OSHA 300A form to summarize the year. In this particular case, we have an OSHA 300A form completed for the year 2012. The best way to read an OSHA 300A form is to first look at the number of cases in each of the 4 categories. If I'm an employee, I am really interested in how many fatalities or deaths occurred on the job last year. Beyond that fact, I am interested in how many days away from work and job transfer or job restriction cases there were. This information is probably going to be more common than a fatality, although fatalities do occur from time to time. The number of days section presents an employee with the idea of how many days were spent away from work by employees who were injured or suffered from illnesses in the preceding year for both days away and job transfer or restriction cases. Finally, the types of injuries and illnesses that occurred within the workplace are denoted in the last section. In my experience, an employee can expect to see more injuries than anything else. The reason for this occurring so frequently is because numerous employers fail to accurately complete the OSHA 300 logs properly and within regulatory standards. However, that is a very lengthy discussion and not appropriate right now. But if you want to know more about that, feel free to contact me. One other important fact that every employer and employee should know. The OSHA 300A form is required to be posted for the preceding year beginning on February 1st and ending April 30th. Many employers choose to leave the OSHA 300A form posted all year round, but that is not an absolute requirement. It just makes access easier for employees to review the document. Again, the OSHA 300 form must be posted in a conspicuous place within the work location. And we're now moving on to the OSHA 301 form. I don't really want to spend a whole lot of time on the OSHA 301 form, but some of you may actually have to complete this document from time to time in your regular line of duty. That being said, presented on your screen, you will find the Injury and Illness Report form. As I mentioned earlier, an organization may elect to maintain an equivalent form but the equivalent form must contain at least all of the information presented on the OSHA 301 form. The OSHA 301 form is completed when an injury or illness is reported to the employer or to a supervisor of the employer. An employer can utilize this form in order to determine the work-relatedness of the injury or illness. Some employers choose to complete an OSHA 301 form for first aid cases and pretty much everything that is reported by way of an injury or illness. To be clear, just because an employer completes an OSHA 301 form, that does not mean the reported injury or illness is necessarily work-related, nor does it necessitate an absolute workers' compensation claim. These are actually considered extremely related, but separate issues. The OSHA 301 form contains a few basic sections. Firstly, information about who completed the form and about the employee is essential. If the employee was seen by a licensed healthcare professional or healthcare provider, that information is noted on the form also. Lastly, a description about what happened needs to be completed on the form. For example, an event had to have happened, so the employer would log what is believed to have occurred, when and where the event occurred, and other relevant or pertinent details pertaining to the event. Again, employers have a propensity to keep the OSHA 301 form confidential, although employees can always access a copy of the OSHA 301 form for their own injury or illness. You have now reached the end of this video presentation. This presentation has been produced by MW Consulting, LLC. Feel at liberty to contact us directly. Thank you.